My name is Hannah Whitlow. I'm a 36-year-old mother of two, and I can tell you exactly when I stopped feeling safe in my own home. It was around 2:17 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of my daughter's bare feet slapping against the hardwood floor. Then my bedroom door burst open, and Sadie stood there in her pajama pants and an oversized sweatshirt, tears running down her cheeks, her face pale and shaking. "Mommy?" she whispered, out of breath. He locked the door. He told me I'd be sorry if I talked. At first, I didn't understand. My brain was foggy. I thought maybe she'd had a nightmare, but the way she was trembling told me this wasn't something imagined. Her arms were folded tightly across her chest. Her voice was thin, afraid. I sat up fast. "What? Who said that to you?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just climbed into my bed, curled into me like she was 4 years old again, and clutched my shirt so tightly that her knuckles turned white. And then, as if her body couldn't take it anymore, she started crying. No sound, just the kind of deep, helpless sobs that come from someplace beyond words. That was when the wave of dread hit me, cold and sudden, because I already knew who she meant. Ryan, my brother-in-law. I didn't ask another question. I pulled her tighter with one arm and reached for my phone with the other. My thumb hovered for a second over the emergency call button. Just a second. Then I pressed it. The operator picked up. I whispered into the phone. "I need police at my home immediately. My daughter just told me something. Please, no sirens." I kept my voice steady because Sadie needed me to be steady. She was shaking against me, and all I could think about was how many signs I had ignored. How many times I had told myself she was just sad about her dad being gone. How many times I told myself Ryan was just trying to help. The 911 dispatcher was calm. She asked me our address, if we were safe right now, if the man in question was still in the house. I answered quietly, trying not to let Sadie hear my panic, but I could feel it building in my chest, like a scream I couldn't let out. "Yes," I said, "he's sleeping downstairs. Or at least, I think he is. Please hurry." When I ended the call, I kissed Sadie's forehead and held her even closer. I wanted to tell her everything was going to be okay, but I didn't want to make promises I couldn't keep. Not yet. In that moment, everything in my world shifted. My husband had been dead for just over a month. I had spent those weeks trying to keep my head above water, trying to keep my kids fed and dressed and off their screens for 5 minutes a day. And Ryan had offered to help. He'd said, "You shouldn't be alone right now." And I had believed him. Now I was sitting in my bed, holding my daughter like a shield, waiting for police officers to come and take him away. Sadie didn't say anything more. She didn't need to. Her face, her body, her silence told me more than words ever could. I had failed her. I had let someone into our home, someone I thought I could trust, and now she was scared to sleep in her own bed. I kept the door locked and sat with my back against it until the headlights of the police car glowed against the curtains. I heard the faint knock. I rushed to open it for them, whispering again, "He's downstairs." The officer nodded. "We've got it from here, ma'am." Sadie sat in my bed and watched them walk past, her little hands gripping her knees. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't ask what was going to happen. I think deep down she already knew, and maybe that was the worst part. I looked at her, memorizing the fear in her eyes, and I made myself a promise. This would never happen again. You always think you'd recognize danger, that you'd know if something was off, that your instincts would kick in. But sometimes danger doesn't kick down the front door. Sometimes it smiles at you across the dinner table and offers to pick your kids up from school. And sometimes you don't realize what's really happening until your daughter runs into your room in the middle of the night, crying and begging you to protect her. That was the night everything changed. 6 weeks after my husband Derek died, the house felt like a museum no one wanted to visit. His toothbrush still sat in the bathroom cup. His flannel shirt hung on the back of our bedroom door. His favorite coffee mug was in the sink, untouched since the day of the accident. I would walk from room to room in the quiet, trying to convince myself that I was strong enough to carry the weight of life for me and the kids. But grief doesn't give you time to prepare. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It just walks in, unpacks its bags, and takes over your home. Every moment felt heavy. Getting up in the morning, making breakfast, checking the mail, answering questions from people who didn't know what to say. The kids looked at me like they wanted me to fix it, but I had no idea how. Sadie, my daughter, had changed the most. She was always a thoughtful child, quiet but sharp. She used to draw for hours and tell me stories about the animals she imagined living in the backyard. But after the funeral, she stopped drawing. She stopped talking much at all. She followed me around the house like a shadow. At night, she wouldn't fall asleep unless I stayed with her until she was out cold. Caleb, on the other hand, was too young to fully understand what had happened. At 6 years old, he still asked me when Daddy was coming home from the hospital. I'd sit down with him and explain it again, softly, as patiently as I could, even though each time felt like tearing the bandage off a wound that never healed. One night, I found myself crying over a pile of unfolded laundry, just sobbing. Not because of the clothes, but because everything felt impossible. That's when my phone lit up with a text from Ryan, Derek's older brother. He'd always been a little distant from us, but not unfriendly. He lived 2 hours away, and we only really saw him during holidays or birthdays. The message said, "Thinking about you and the kids. If you need anything, I'm here." At first, I didn't respond. But the next day, when Caleb had a fever and Sadie refused to get out of bed, I texted him back, "I could use some help." He showed up that weekend with groceries, books for the kids, and this quiet calm that I thought we needed. He didn't try to say the right things. He just helped. Cooked dinner, loaded the dishwasher, offered to handle pickups and drop-offs for school. I was running on fumes, and he was willing to carry some of the weight. That mattered. At first, I felt relief. Finally, someone else in the house who understood what we had lost. Someone who had loved Derek, too. When he offered to stay in the guest room for a few weeks to help me get back on my feet, I agreed. I didn't think twice. I should have. The kids had mixed reactions. Caleb was thrilled to have another adult around, especially someone who let him stay up 20 minutes past bedtime and played video games with him. Sadie was more reserved. She didn't smile much around Ryan, and she didn't talk to him unless I was there. I assumed she just needed time. One afternoon, I found her sitting on the porch swing with her arms crossed, staring at the trees. I sat beside her. "You okay, Bug?" I asked. She shrugged. "I miss Dad." I wrapped my arm around her. "Me too." Then she said, without looking at me, "Uncle Ryan isn't like Dad." I nodded. "He's not, but he's trying to help us. That's a good thing, right?" She didn't answer. She just stared ahead and eventually got up to go inside. I should have listened closer. But at the time, I needed help. Bills were piling up. The roof had a leak I couldn't afford to fix. I was back at work part-time, and every second of the day felt like a race I couldn't win. Ryan was stepping in and making things easier. He cooked. He helped with homework. He even took Caleb to the dentist when I had to stay late at work. People said I was lucky to have family who cared that much, and I believed them. There were moments that should have stood out. Small things. Sadie flinching when Ryan walked into the room too quickly. The way she stopped going to bed on her own. I thought it was trauma. I thought it was grief. I told myself over and over again that she just needed time, that we all did. But something inside me stayed unsettled, a feeling I couldn't name. I pushed it down and told myself I was imagining things. That was the atmosphere in our home. 1 part exhaustion, 1 part gratitude, and 1 part quiet, unspoken tension. I was surviving, barely. The kids were surviving, and Ryan was there, filling in the blanks I thought I couldn't manage. It wasn't until that night, when Sadie ran into my room crying and told me what he said, that I realized I had made a terrible mistake. But by then, the damage had already begun. At first, everything felt manageable. Ryan blended into our daily routines without much disruption. He made dinner most nights, took out the trash, helped Caleb with his spelling. From the outside, it looked like we were beginning to heal. But inside the walls of our home, things were shifting, subtly at first. Sadie grew more distant. She was always a quiet girl, but now she hardly spoke at all unless I asked her direct questions. She stopped asking to read bedtime stories with me. She avoided the living room when Ryan was there. When I told her she could talk to me about anything, she would nod but say nothing. Her eyes said she wanted to believe me, but something held her back. One evening, I came home late from work and found Ryan and Sadie in the kitchen. She was standing by the fridge, tense. her arms locked straight at her sides. Ryan was behind her, leaning over the counter, flipping through mail. As soon as I walked in, Sadie's face changed. She didn't smile or run to hug me. She just looked down and mumbled, "Hi, Mom," before walking quickly upstairs. I asked Ryan if everything was okay, and he said she was just tired. "She gets moody in the afternoons. Probably just a phase," he said with a casual shrug. I wanted to believe him. I told myself maybe he was right, but something about the way she left the room stuck with me. A few days later, I asked her to bring me her laundry. She handed me a balled-up pile of clothes, but a small notebook slipped out and hit the floor. I picked it up, expecting it to be filled with doodles or homework reminders. Instead, every single page had the same sentence scribbled in tight handwriting. "Don't tell, don't tell, don't tell." I stood frozen, staring at it. My first instinct was to tell myself she was working through grief, that maybe it was a strange coping method. But when I looked up and saw her watching me from the hallway with wide eyes and her hands clasped behind her back, I felt my stomach twist. "Sadie," I said gently, "why did you write this?" She didn't answer. She just stepped backward slowly, then turned and went to her room. I followed and knocked softly. "Sweetheart, I'm not mad. I just want to know if someone said something to you. Did someone tell you not to talk?" Silence. I waited. Still nothing. "I'm here for you, always," I said. "You can tell me anything." She finally opened the door, but her face was unreadable. She climbed onto her bed, pulled her blanket over her knees, and whispered, "It's just something I made up." I nodded slowly and let it go. For the moment. But a seed had been planted. Later that night, I walked by the guest room where Ryan stayed. The door was locked. I stopped in the hallway, confused. I knocked once, lightly. "Ryan?" I asked. "Yeah?" His voice was flat and calm. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just reading. Long day," he said through the door. I didn't press. I walked away, but I made a mental note of the locked door. The next morning, Sadie had bags under her eyes and barely touched her breakfast. I asked if she wanted to stay home from school, but she insisted on going. Caleb, as always, was his usual bouncy self, oblivious to everything swirling around him. I began paying more attention. I noticed how Ryan started correcting Sadie more often. "Stand up straight. Speak clearly. Don't slouch." It wasn't what he said, but how he said it. Low, quiet, but firm. It made her flinch, and she never flinched before. One weekend, I had to run errands and left the kids with Ryan. When I returned, Caleb was in the backyard playing with chalk. Sadie was nowhere in sight. I asked where she was, and Ryan said she was probably in her room being dramatic. I went upstairs. Her door was closed. I knocked. "Sadie?" "It's Mom." No answer. I opened the door and found her sitting in the closet with a blanket around her. She was rocking slightly. I dropped to my knees beside her. "Sweetheart, what's going on?" She looked up, eyes red, and whispered, "I just want things to go back to before." I held her and asked if something happened. She didn't answer. She just whispered, "Please don't make me go downstairs." That night, I lay awake thinking about everything I'd ignored. The notebook, the flinches, the silences, her fear. It wasn't just grief. Something was happening right under my nose, and I had been too tired, too overwhelmed, and too trusting to see it. I didn't know the full truth yet, but I knew something wasn't right. I stopped leaving Sadie alone with Ryan. I started making excuses to stay home more often. I watched, I listened, I paid attention, and I waited. What I didn't know then was that the moment of truth was coming, fast, and when it did, it would shatter every illusion I had left. The night it happened, the house was quiet in the way that only comes after exhaustion. Caleb had fallen asleep with a Lego in his hand and one sock missing. I carried him to bed and pulled the covers up to his chin. He mumbled something about a dragon and turned over. Sadie had said she wasn't tired and stayed in the living room drawing. Ryan was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner, humming low to himself. I remember standing in the hallway for a second, just watching them. Sadie's hunched shoulders, Ryan moving slowly behind her, and feeling like I was on the outside of something. Something I didn't understand. I told Sadie to go to bed soon. She looked at me with tired eyes and nodded. I went upstairs and showered. I had been trying to practice a kind of self-care, even if it was just 5 quiet minutes under hot water. but the entire time I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. When I came out of the bathroom, I noticed that the hallway light outside my room was off. We always kept that light on for Sadie. She hated walking upstairs in the dark. I called out her name. No answer. I walked to her room and found it empty. The bed still made, her sketch pad on the pillow. That was the moment my heart dropped. I turned quickly and headed downstairs. The kitchen light was off. The living room empty. I called for Ryan. No response. I moved faster now, scanning the house. When I got to the guest room, the door was shut and locked. I knocked hard. Ryan? Silence. Ryan, is Sadie in there with you? A pause, then his voice, calm, too calm. We're just talking. She's upset. Give us a minute. I stood frozen. Every part of me screamed that something was wrong. Sadie didn't want to be near him. She never sought him out. Why would she be in his room at night, with the door locked? Open the door, Ryan. Another pause. Hannah, she just needs someone to talk to who isn't you right now. Don't overreact. I banged on the door. Open it now. I heard the sound of a lock clicking. The door cracked open. Ryan stood in the doorway, blocking the view behind him. His face was smooth, like nothing unusual had just happened. But he wasn't smiling. He looked at me like I was the problem. She's fine, he said. I pushed past him. Sadie was sitting on the edge of the bed. Her face was pale. She looked up at me, and the fear in her eyes was instant, deep, and undeniable. I walked straight to her, knelt in front of her, and took her hands. Are you okay? I asked. She didn't answer. She looked down. Sadie, look at me. She raised her head slowly. Then she whispered, barely loud enough for me to hear, He locked the door. He told me I'd be sorry if I talked. I didn't blink. I didn't hesitate. I stood, put myself between her and Ryan, and said, Get out of this room, now. Ryan stepped back, but I could see the calculation in his face, like he was deciding what to say, how to spin it. I didn't care what came out of his mouth. I turned back to Sadie and wrapped my arms around her. She didn't cry this time. She didn't tremble. She just clung to me, quietly, like she'd been holding her breath for weeks and was finally allowed to exhale. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, I spoke clearly, without looking back. My daughter just disclosed something. I need officers at my home immediately. No sirens. I gave them our address and hung up. Ryan stood by the wall, arms crossed, as if this was some misunderstanding that he would clear up once I calmed down. He said nothing. I didn't speak to him again. I locked the bedroom door, pulled Sadie into my lap, and stayed there. Every second felt endless, but I felt no fear anymore, only anger and clarity. 10 minutes later, I saw the flash of headlights through the curtains. Then 2 officers knocked gently. I opened the door, told them everything I knew, and watched them step inside. They asked Ryan to come with them. He didn't resist. One of the officers placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said, You did the right thing. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. When the door closed behind them, I looked down at Sadie. Her eyes were wide, but her breathing had slowed. I brushed the hair from her face and told her the truth. You're safe now, I promise you. She didn't answer. She just closed her eyes and leaned into me. That was the moment everything shifted. Not because it was over, but because I had chosen to see what was right in front of me and do something about it. After the officers took Ryan from our house, I sat on the edge of my bed, holding Sadie in my arms. She had stopped crying, but she was still stiff, like her body didn't know whether it was safe yet. I whispered that it was over, that she was brave, that I believed her. I kept repeating those words because I needed her to hear them, and I needed to hear them, too. The officers told me they would be in touch. They said there would be follow-up questions and that someone from Child Protective Services would need to speak with Sadie. They assured me that what I did was the right thing. I nodded, thanked them, and closed the door behind them. I stood in the quiet of the house for a moment and realized that it no longer felt like home. The next morning, I called my mother and asked her to come stay with us. She drove in from 2 towns over without asking questions. When she walked through the door and saw the look on my face, she hugged me like I was still her little girl. I finally let myself cry. That same day, I took Sadie to a child advocacy center. A licensed forensic interviewer spoke with her while I waited in a room down the hall, my hands clenched in my lap. It was the longest hour of my life. When the interviewer came out, she sat down beside me and said Sadie had shared enough for them to pursue a full investigation. There were no visible injuries, but the psychological harm was clear. Ryan had not physically touched her, but he had isolated her, threatened her, and manipulated her emotionally. He had told her not to tell anyone, that if she did, he would leave and never come back, that bad things would happen, that no one would believe her. He used silence like a weapon. He used trust like a trap. Sadie had carried that fear for weeks, and I had missed it. The weight of that realization nearly broke me. I thought I was protecting my children by keeping the family close. I thought grief was the enemy, and that anything that helped ease it must be good. I didn't see what was happening until it nearly went too far. Ryan was charged with child endangerment, unlawful imprisonment, and attempted coercion of a minor. I gave my full statement to the detective assigned to the case. Sadie didn't have to testify in court, thanks to the forensic interview. Her voice had already been heard. When I was called into the district attorney's office, they showed me the transcripts of what Sadie had said. I read her words on the page and had to stop halfway through. My heart ached with shame, with anger, with the deep soul-level heartbreak that only a mother could understand. I thought he was going to be like Daddy, she had said, but then he wasn't. He made me feel like I wasn't safe even in my own house. The legal process was slow but thorough. Ryan denied everything at first, claimed I was confused, emotional, unstable. He said I was exaggerating to punish him for trying to discipline the kids. But the evidence, the journal, Sadie's testimony, the locked door, the dispatcher call, told another story. And the story was clear. Eventually, his lawyer arranged a plea deal. Ryan pled guilty to a lesser charge and received probation, counseling, and a no-contact order. It wasn't the justice I had hoped for. I wanted to see him taken away in shackles. I wanted him to understand the damage he had done. But the most important thing was that he could never come near us again. And that Sadie knew I had chosen her. After the court process, I sat Sadie and Caleb down in our living room. Caleb didn't understand everything, but I told him the truth in a way he could handle. I said Uncle Ryan wasn't allowed to visit anymore because he had broken our trust, and in our family, we protect each other. Sadie sat next to me the whole time, quiet but calm. That night, she asked to sleep in my room again, but instead of curling into a ball or hiding under the blankets, she looked up at me and asked, "Are we safe now?" I didn't hesitate. I said yes. She nodded once and went to sleep. I watched her chest rise and fall, steady for the first time in weeks. I knew we had a long way to go, therapy, healing, rebuilding trust. But I also knew this. She was no longer carrying the fear alone, and neither was I. That night, for the first time since Derek died, I felt like a mother again. Not just someone trying to survive, not someone barely holding it together, but a protector, a fighter, the woman who made a promise and kept it. No matter how broken I had been, no matter how much I had missed, I had made the one decision that mattered most. I had believed her. It's been 8 months since that night. Our lives haven't returned to what they were before, and I don't expect they ever will. But something has changed in us. Not just in Sadie, not just in me, but in all three of us. We are no longer a family struggling to survive grief. We are a family that has learned how to fight for safety, how to listen, how to protect what matters. Sadie goes to therapy once a week. At first, she barely spoke during the sessions. She sat with her knees pulled up to her chest, arms crossed, eyes on the floor. Now she walks into the office on her own. She talks. She draws again. Her sketchbook lives on her nightstand, filled with soft pencil portraits of animals, trees, her brother, and sometimes me. She's even drawn our old house a few times, but in the newer pictures, it's always missing one window. I don't ask her what that means. I just let her draw. Caleb still doesn't fully understand what happened. He remembers that Ryan used to live with us and that now he's not allowed near us. He accepts that without much question, and I don't push for more. I watch him closely. I pay attention to his behavior, his tone, his energy. I don't take anything for granted. We live in a new place now. After everything with Ryan, I knew we couldn't stay in that house. Every creak in the floor, every corner of every room held too much memory. So I packed our things and found a small rental closer to my parents. My mother visits often. My dad built a treehouse for the kids in the backyard. It's not big, but it's safe. And that's everything. I have learned to trust my instincts again. Or maybe, for the first time. I used to ignore that little voice in my head. I used to explain it away, especially when someone looked me in the eye and told me I was overreacting. I won't do that again. When Sadie looked at me with wide, fearful eyes, I didn't wait for confirmation. I didn't ask for proof. I acted. And that action changed everything. There's a guilt that comes with not seeing it sooner. That guilt doesn't disappear. It sits with me quietly when the kids are asleep. It reminds me of the nights I left Sadie alone in the house with him, believing I was doing the right thing. It whispers all the ways I could have protected her better. But that guilt is not the whole story. The whole story is that I listened. The whole story is that I acted. And the whole story is that Sadie is healing, not broken. I've spoken to other mothers since then. Women who have gone through similar experiences. Some caught it early, some didn't. All of them carry that same quiet ache. But the ones who stood up, the ones who believed their child instead of dismissing them, are the ones who broke the cycle. That's the part no one talks about. How easily trust can be used against you. How someone can slip into your life and wear the mask of family. How love, or something that looks like it, can blind you if you're desperate enough to feel safe again. I wasn't weak. I was tired. I wasn't naive. I was grieving. That doesn't excuse what I missed, but it explains why it happened. And it's exactly why I share this story now, because someone else out there might be tired, might be grieving, might be holding their daughter's hand and wondering if they're just imagining something. If that's you, believe the feeling. Don't wait for confirmation. You are not crazy. You are not paranoid. If a child tells you they feel unsafe, listen. If your gut tells you something isn't right, trust it. It's better to overreact and be wrong than to stay silent and be too late. Sadie still has hard nights. Sometimes she wakes up and asks me to sit beside her bed. I do it without hesitation. I run my hand through her hair and tell her she's safe. Not because I want her to forget, but because I want her to know she's not alone anymore. She never has to carry fear by herself again. One afternoon, we were at the park. Sadie was swinging while Caleb ran around pretending to be a superhero. She looked over at me and smiled. Genuine, open, unforced. She said, "I don't think about him much anymore." I nodded. "You don't have to. That part of our story is finished." She kicked her feet higher into the sky. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't make you forget. But it gives you new ground to stand on. It gives you your breath back. It lets you swing into the air without fear. So that's what we're doing now. We're healing. We're living. And we're never letting anyone take that from us again. Thank you for listening to my story. If this reminded you of something you've gone through or something you're going through now, please know you're not alone. You are allowed to trust your instincts. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to believe your child the first time they say something feels wrong. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and comment below. I read every comment, and I would love to know what this brought up for you, or what part spoke to you the most. And if you want more true stories that matter, ones about survival, family, healing, and strength, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Take care of yourself, and take care of each other.